Members of the board, we're honored to have the co-chairs of our district's calendar committee, Ms. Melanie Mirzwa and Alicia Bono, here with us tonight to give an update on the work of our calendar committee. Chief of Staff Lauren Hooten will provide introductory remarks on this agenda item. Welcome to all of you.
Hey, board member, Superintendent Kingsley, thank you for the opportunity to provide this update on the work of the calendar committee this evening. As Brian mentioned, Alicia and Melanie are here to present to you this update. They'll be providing you with some background on the work of the calendar committee. But just for a bit of context on why this item is coming to you in December, in light of the recent change to the 2021-2022 school year calendar, Cabinet asked the calendar committee to put together some options for your consideration for the 2022-2023 school year calendar. So those options were included in your packet, and our co-chairs will provide you with a bit more information this evening, and we'll ask for your feedback on those at the end of the presentation. We also wanted to mention that there is a calendar survey that is currently out in the community. It will be open until January 1st. Because that survey is still open, we will not be sharing comprehensive data with you this evening. We'd like folks to have an opportunity to continue to weigh in, but as soon as that survey does close, we can provide the board and the public with information about what's collected in that survey. So with that, I will turn it over to Melanie and Alicia.
Thank you so much for having us this evening. We wanted to start out by just telling you a little bit about the purpose of our committee and just gaining some context together. Underneath our name up there is the link to our district calendar page, which contains a lot of information as well. But our purpose is to develop that year-long school calendar with stakeholder input from our committee and community that adheres to CDE school funding and instructional hours, days, those laws, as well as the PSD employee agreement and district policy ICA.
And as you can see on the slide here, we also listed the calendar committee members. You can see it is very representative of the district community, administrators, employee group representatives, parents, teachers, and other district personnel as well. So the calendar committee has met twice already. We met in September and November, and it was incumbent upon us as a calendar committee to really make sure that we understood the parameters around which we can create drafts to bring to the superintendent and to the board. And these are the parameters and the supporting documents that guide our work. As you know, we have to adhere to the CDE minimum days in Colorado law and minimum hours, along with the first semester seat time hours for full funding of a full-time student, the district policy that Melanie just mentioned, and of course, everything that lives within our employee agreement.
So this right here is our current school year calendar, the calendar that we're living in right now. And this year, those 2 days were added at fall break to create a week-long fall break.
So as Lauren mentioned in the introduction, Cabinet did ask for us to create 3 options. In the upcoming 3 slides, we will go through these. And please remember that any changes that might want to be made for the 22-23 calendar really needs to be made by January for master scheduling purposes, because we start those processes that early, obviously, in our system.
So we're going to walk you through each one of these 3 options, and you have copies of this in Novus for reference, so they're going to be really small up here. So option 1 is the currently approved 22-23 calendar that was approved last April, and it does not include that full week at fall break. So option 2 does provide us with a full week of fall break, and that came from starting 1 day earlier for students than the currently approved calendar, and it moves the November BW day, which is a building work day, to August from November. So that puts it at the start of the school year. So that's where we get those 2 days. That's option 2. A third option would be that full week of fall break again, starting 2 days earlier and keeping that November workday. We did consider a couple other things, shortening winter break by 2 days, but with all the input we've received at this point, we would not recommend that. And the other thing is just to note on any of these options, we did not extend the semester or the school year at all.
We wanted to make sure that we also provide the impetus for what prompted just asking to do a district-wide survey. When we first met as a calendar committee, it really became abundantly clear that there were two things that were being consistently talked about to everybody in the committee, and I think district-wide, that we can all attest to. So we really decided our goal was to gather long-term decision-making input within the current parameters that we spoke to earlier. And it was really around the continuous talk around heat mitigation and a full week of fall break. And we also recognize that formal input has not been given and taken district-wide in several years. And we built the survey to only reflect what calendar committee is tasked with, right? To work within those parameters. And we wanted to make sure that we got input from everybody possible. As you see, it's all staff, all parents, anybody else who wants to, and the email also went directly to all secondary students. It is currently open. It closes January 1st, and the plan moving forward is to do this every 2 years so that we are continuously getting input on the calendar moving forward.
So that leads us to a couple of next steps. So for the 22-23 calendar, tonight we're here providing these 3 options for feedback. And then January 11th, if the board is interested in making changes, a revised 22-23 will be presented for adoption. And then the charge of our calendar committee is that on January 24th at our next meeting, we'll review all the survey results. And those survey results will also be posted to our website at the conclusion of the survey. And then in April is when we will recommend a 23-24 calendar that we will present to the board for adoption. And that's just with the caveat along the way that negotiations can always affect calendar recommendations.
So those are the options presented to you. So if the board is interested in pursuing one of those following options for the next school year, then that would be the next steps. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead, Superintendent.
Mel and Alicia, thank you very much for being here. So as we asked the board for some feedback on the particular options to understand where their mindsets and values are, I know as we have the survey that is still sitting out into the community, our team is starting to receive preliminary feedback, right? Both qualitative and quantitative. And I've had some, over the course of the last few months, I've had some thoughtful and engaging conversations with members of our community that represent both the Jewish faith and the Muslim faith who have curiosity around how best to consider approaching the development of our school calendar in a more inclusive way. So I know that you all have been a part and at the table. Do you see as an opportunity for us to potentially bring the committee back together to engage in that process to consider some of those topics for discussion in service of the next school year? Or is that something that would need a longer runway?
I think both. I think, we meet again on January 24th, so certainly we want to consider all the community input at that point. And we do have an open box at the end of our survey, too, that we want to read through and make sure that we're representative of all the comments. I think that's also an ongoing conversation within our community, too, to make sure that we are constantly listening and reflecting what our whole community is looking for within each of our calendars.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And also say when you think, and thinking through the 22-23 calendar, and even just thinking about making a change of adding 2 days to fall break, of how tight that is. And so that's really where the survey input and definitely thinking through what you just talked about, Superintendent Kingsley, is thinking for those future years and really making sure that we're building the best calendars for everybody within the system.
So members of the board, I asked that question with intentionality to, as we're asking feedback around these particular options, making sure that we're clear on your collective values to charge the committee with thinking about whether it's next year's calendar or future year's calendar. I just think it's an important point for you to be aware of. We are putting 3 options in front of you, but if you have suggestions around other things that we need to be considerate of, I think this would be an appropriate space to be able to start to name those, just in service of knowing that we have a lot of really thoughtful people at the table. We're asking the community to engage and provide us feedback, that we really want to be considerate and as inclusive as possible in this process.
So I believe this is the opportunity for the board to provide some feedback on this. Nate, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yes, I think it makes good sense to have a full week of fall break, and so I'd be interested in pursuing option 2 or option 3. But I think it should be, our consideration should be informed by the results of that survey. So I'd like to be able to have the opportunity to get some of that data before we have to make a decision on that calendar.
You want to say something, Superintendent?
Yes, and Nate, thank you very much for that feedback. I just want us to make just sure, I may have misspoke. Here tonight, we're just simply looking for discussion. We do want to make sure that we're putting that data in front of you to inform a final decision. But tonight, it's just kind of gleaning some mindsets, your values and beliefs around this based upon your reaction of what you heard from these thoughtful leaders tonight. I just think it was really important, but we will make sure that we share that data with you prior to asking the board to make a formal decision on the calendar.
Go ahead, Jim.
It seems like there were conditions that existed this year that pushed us into the week-long break, right? So I guess that's part of why you're making this proposal. And I guess one of the questions then, as we think about this, is what are the odds that those conditions exist a year from now, that we might find ourselves in the same spot of, maybe we should be doing that again, and maybe don't have the option if we haven't thought about it the way you are tonight.
Yeah, I think that's why it's really important to very intentionally make the calendar decisions moving forward and trying to plan out for future years as well, based on input from the board and community.
Jess?
So I have to say I'm torn, because on the one hand, I personally think option 3 is great. I think out of the options available. But to Superintendent Kingsley's point, if we add those 2 days at Thanksgiving, we don't allow ourselves any of that wiggle room if we do try to consider other parts of our population and days that they may need to have off for religious or other reasons. So I'm concerned about limiting ourselves.
Yes, I would say within current parameters, it is that tight. And that's why, again, we were only able to really provide 2 options, and you saw there wasn't a ton of, like you said, wiggle room within that, as things currently exist.
Other comments? Kristen? DJ?
I have
Sorry.
one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, let DJ go.
Go ahead, DJ.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank you for pointing out to make this reach out to our parents every 2 years. I think that is a great change, because I think we do need that data and that information out there. I also want to say, you guys get me every time I start to read or I hear you say year-long calendar, because I'm thinking, oh, are we going to actually get more of a year-round school? Which is something I personally think would be great, but we are not there yet. I understand that. I do wonder if we could get the attendance data for that week of Thanksgiving. We see or we hear at times that there's a lot of parents that take off extra days to travel with their kids. But if we could get some data to show that or to understand how big of a thing that is, I think that would be great. I also would be very interested in trying to have a better understanding of holidays for religions and that are not on our calendar right now. So that would be another thing that I would like more information on to be able to make a good decision. The option 2 right now is the one that I would lean towards, just because I'm nervous about starting school earlier, just because we haven't got that air conditioning thing figured out. So that would be where I'd lean to at this moment, just to give you my value. Thank you, guys.
Great. I think Kristen had some comments, and then Carolyn, if you want to say something, speak up after Kristen.
Sure, thanks.
Yeah, I just had the similar questions as to what the attendance rates were for that Monday, Tuesday, at the beginning of Thanksgiving week, and if we saw a noticeable decline on those 2 days, because I think that would influence my thinking as well. Because right now I am thinking that while that seems like an appropriate thing to do, it also just does not give us the flexibility for such holidays like Yom Kippur. And that would be something that would definitely needs to be thought of in the calendars going forward. So, not giving us the wiggle room for that, I think seeing the attendance data on that would definitely, and actually if we could see the attendance data for Yom Kippur as well, and just sort of do a comparison there, would, I think, be very informational for me. So, thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that's more work.
No, it would really be work for IT, so I'll just apologize for them.
And Dustin's not here to defend himself either, so I mean, yeah.
So if we think really of what years would be usable data, right? Obviously, this year isn't because we were all off. And then the year prior was COVID. And so I think it would be asking IT if it is feasible to pull probably maybe 2 years of 19 and 20. And then that way we would at least have 2 years to look at. So we can definitely ask for that. And if they can, we'll get it your way. Thank you. You're welcome.
Carolyn?
Okay, I think I'm kind of where DJ is at, where I could go with like 2 or 3. We need more information about being more inclusive about the schedule, what that's going to look like. And we also need to see the survey stuff. But I'm thinking I'm leaning towards option 2 or 3. And I would like to see our committee going forward have more people from the community on it, somebody from the Jewish community and other religious backgrounds to kind of help us balance it out and be more representative of our community too. So I think that's something that we need to keep working on.
Can I speak to that real quick?
Yeah, please,
Thank
go
you.
ahead.
Yes, we definitely, we are an open committee until it gets, we have no top number right now. So if there are people out there listening to our board meetings who do want to join, we actually had someone just email us recently and who will be joining us at our next meeting. So absolutely, please reach out to Melanie or I if you know of people who would be good to serve. Anybody out there listening or anybody who would be interested in serving. Absolutely. Thank you, Carolyn.
So, go ahead, Jess, and then I'll say something.
So I would kind of like to extend the religious and holidays days to there's a list of various holidays that you guys have on as part of your calendar committee. So if we could pull even just, I don't know all of the holidays, but kind of like the highlights that maybe our students would be potentially off school from, just to kind of collect as much information as possible to see how many of those days would be meaningful. And then, I don't know if it's a question so much as a comment, but if the goal is for us to potentially adopt a different calendar for next year come January, will negotiations be sufficiently done if there is a concern that the calendar the negotiations would affect our calendar? Okay.
Negotiations will not be done in January, so I want to be clear about that. I think what we are aiming to get clear on our instructional days. I think where I would say it's safe to say that we will have continued dialogue about is how to potentially address professional development for employees across the system is an ongoing dialogue that we have just begun in the negotiations process, which I think can potentially be discussed at a later time. But what we're trying to get clear now is for our parents, for master scheduling purposes, to ensure that we're clear in naming what our instructional days for students are in the year ahead. But I think it's a really great question.
All right, so, pardon me. I think the data that's been requested and that you say IT is going to get the honor to provide is, it will be very interesting. I'd really like to see that. I think it might also be interesting, and I know this is then not an IT, but your committee, right? What would it actually look like to add the most important holidays for our Jewish and Muslim students and colleagues to this calendar? I mean, I can imagine, but I'm not in the bits like you are. And is it a possibility for you to even consider that in the next month or so, or is that asking too much?
I think so as it sits right now, first semester, with the way high school schedules are built, there is anything that's taken out of first semester has to get put somewhere within first semester. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's absolutely flexibility in second semester if someone naming exactly which holidays those are, and then us looking at where those lie. So first semester, as things currently sit, there is not flexibility. Second semester, there also really isn't, according to instructional required days at this point in time. So I hope that sort of answers your question.
Superintendent?
So Alicia, thank you for that response. What I like to, if it's okay with the board, I'd like to charge staff to be able to go back and reflect on what's possible in that particular space. There are trade-offs, as Alicia just referenced, in terms of time and whether it's the end of the semester or starting our school year earlier. But there are trade-offs that our Jewish and Muslim families and other families in our community are making as a result of our calendar being what it is, right? Do I go to the band concert or do I go to a service with my family? Those are real-life scenarios that are playing out in some of the homes of our students, and I think it's important, and I know they're incredibly thoughtful and inclusive, but let's ask staff, if it's okay with you, to just reflect on our conversation tonight. I think your mindsets and values were quite clear for our considerations. We may not be able to achieve all of the things that we aspire to achieve in the year ahead, but I think it's one, important that we name our intention, to do the very best we can as a committee collectively in partnership with our community to see what we can potentially do for the year ahead. And if we need to think about that as a 2-year strategy, we'll bring back to the board the best available options for us to consider, knowing that the conversation was really thoughtful tonight, if that's fair.
No, I appreciate that. The other thing that I would just share is, having come from the East Coast back in the 90s, or actually we got here in 2002, but in any case, my children were attending public school in New Jersey, and there were definitely the high Jewish holidays were definitely days off in that space. So this is not, at least in some parts of the country, attending to those religious needs is not an unusual request of the calendar, if you will. So just as a bit of context. Anything else on this, or anything else from the two of you in terms of what you would like to hear further from us?
No, I think you gave us a lot of good information. Thank you. Thank you for your comments and for your thoughtfulness. And it sounds like we will be providing you with that information on and it sounds like, just to clarify, that you would like us to look at all holidays that are kind of listed and be able to give you attendance rates for those, or just maybe what are our highest attendance days might make the most sense. I
think you and your colleagues can use some judgment on that, but certainly the the major holidays for at least the Jewish and Muslim faiths. Anything else, Superintendent, on this topic?
I do have a point of clarification. Clarity's kind, and I want to make sure, right now, it's an expectation during those particular holidays that children attend. And so I have curiosity and wonderings on whether our attendance data, knowing it's an expectation that you attend, actually allows staff to make an informed decision on what's in the best interest of those families. So I think it's important data to look at, but I would say it's one data point respectfully, and we should be thinking about the qualitative data that we're gleaning from the survey, as well as we're engaging with our families and thinking about that. But the more that the committee can go back to the drawing board to be inclusive of the feedback that you heard tonight, both about the holidays, but as well as around the fall break, I think just putting your best thinking around what that can look like over the next year, 2 years, would be really helpful as an expectation coming back to this board in January, if that's okay.
I think that's fine, and I therefore expect in our agenda setting that this will play a major, that there'll be a significant amount of time on this topic in the first January meeting.
Correct.
Yeah. So thank you so much, really appreciate it, and thank your colleagues for us as well. We appreciate all of their work and trying to balance a lot of competing interests. There's no question about that, so thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Thank
Good night.
you.
Thank you.